So most of my presentation is for you. So I'm just sharing the science. For others of you, hopefully I've got some new nuggets of knowledge that you'll glean from this. So thank you for having me. So let's get going. So before this journey began, this was my normal. I spent decades struggling with obesity. I became morbidly obese in my late 20s, and I spent the subsequent 20-something years struggling with weight. I had a cervical cancer scare in my late 30s, early 40s. I was diagnosed with prediabetes. My cholesterol was always high, at least in the 190s or higher. I would get ear and sinus infections on a regular basis. For those of you who don't know, I'm about 60% deaf. I'm profoundly deaf in this ear and partial. And I chalked it up to my hearing impairment. Not even connecting, Carol, hello. My menstrual cycles were constantly out of whack. I had hot flash flare-ups big time. I had a persistent throat clearing cough. It was just this very mild. I just had to keep clearing my throat all the time. My knees ached all the time. My skin would break out. I'm not a teenager anymore. Why am I getting all this stuff going on? Couldn't make the connection. I was tired and lethargic a lot. And after eating, I'd go into a brain fog and need power naps all the time. I was slow to recover after illness and injury, and I was fat, 50, frumpy, and frustrated.
Too many F's.
I was trying all kinds of things. You name the diet, I've done them. To many degrees, to some success. I mean, the most I ever lost in one was 106 pounds. But I'm disciplined, I'm a project manager by training, so I'm used to milestones and deadlines and goals to achieve. And yeah, I'd lose the weight, but as soon as I got off the diet, guess what happened? Back on. Diets don't work. Pills and potions. I was taking glucosamine and chondroitin for my knees, and cellulite cream was my big thing. I really thought that would solve my problems. I was a gym rat for a long time. I got into triathlons, got up to the half Ironman distance, and I was ripped. I mean, I was slim. I thought, yeah, I just didn't exercise enough. That was my problem. As soon as I blew out my right knee during a half Ironman, guess what happened? The weight came back on. So hyper-exercising is not the problem. It's not going to solve the problem. And then I followed all these typical things about moderation is the key, and etc. about eating right. None of it was working. Now, I also had a dirty little secret. To this day, I'm not comfortable having my photo taken. I'm not comfortable being videotaped or recorded, which I am today, but this is a big stretch objective for me today. Self-image has been a really big struggle for me. So if you go through my family albums, you won't find fit pictures of me very, very easily. I would sneak down at night and rip them out of the albums if I visited family and saw pictures of myself. I was that humiliated, embarrassed by what I looked like. I'm glad to say that problem is getting a little better, though I still delete about 10 photos before I have one that I like. But it's a journey. I was confused and conflicted, and nothing was connecting. And then a friend recommended I read this book, The China Study. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend you read it. I was so angry by the time I'd finished it because of what I was learning. Especially the last couple of chapters that were explaining why that information is not being made available to us, but it started me on my plant-based journey. I then started watching documentaries on the subject. Forks Over Knives was the first one, then I went to Fat, Sick and Nearly Dead, Food Matters, What the Health, and Food Inc., etc. And I was starting to see testimonials and transformations that were just like, whoa, this is cool. And I was also seeing similar physicians in many of these videos. I thought, there's a whole class of physicians out there that I knew nothing about. And then I started reading their books. So I read Eat to Live by Dr. Joel Fuhrman, and Superimmunity, another book of his, The Pleasure Trap by Doug Lisle, and so on. And the science was making perfect sense to me. I'm a very data-driven person, and it was adding up. This made perfect sense. I dug around on websites for more resources. I love doing research, and I'm quite self-enabling, and went out there digging around and found all kinds of stuff, and started to see a common thread of science and data coming together. And these people were clearly the movers and shakers of this whole thing, this nutritional science. The evidence was there. I wanted in. And I said, go for it. So, September 12, 2011, having read Eat to Live, I followed Dr. Fuhrman's 6-week protocol religiously for 6 weeks. And in 6 weeks, I lost 27 pounds and dropped 2 dress sizes. That was my external feedback as to what was going on. I kept going. And I waited for 100 days because I just had a physical prior to starting this because I wanted my baseline numbers, and I paid up front for the full blood workup, the $300 for the whole 9 yards, And I said, I'm going to come back in 100 days and see what happens. So 100 days later, my cholesterol went down from 196 to 123. I'd been pre-diabetic, that went away. I had the full blood panel done, endocrine, all kinds of good stuff. Everything came back exactly where it needed to be. My taste buds had changed. My body chemistry was changing. I was fizzing from the inside. I just felt clean and sort of over-rooted out. It was just a completely different sensation. This time, things were different. It was nothing like any diet I'd ever done before. So then I started watching more documentaries, and it's just been self-feeding. I've been digging into all kinds of things, and The Game Changers is coming out sometime this summer. I'm really looking forward to that one. I've read more and more books. I'm a big time reader. Yeah, anytime I'm sitting in a traffic light or waiting an appointment for something, I have a book with me all the time. I've discovered more and more scientists and physicians, and some of them are here in this room today. Dr. Zondo back in the corner, you're on here, and Dr. Linda Carney, members of our own community. These are the movers and shakers of this industry and the whole science about plant-based science. And I started listening to their podcasts, looking up TED Talks and videos that they've done to get more and more information. The testimonials and success stories have been really powerful. These resources I see in the bottom right-hand corner of this slide, those are the ones I leverage on a constant basis to self-motivate myself. But there are 4 stories that have really stood out to me, and here they are. So Rip Esselstyn in the Engine 2 story. Not sure if you know about him, but he was a firefighter here in Austin. Engine 2 is the fire station in downtown Austin. And he is the son of Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn, and his father obviously educated him on plant-based science, and a fellow firefighter had cardiovascular issues, and he managed to encourage the entire fire station to go on a plant-based diet to help him out. And to cut a long story short, everybody got healthy, and he ended up leaving the fire station because he realized he could be more valuable to society by starting a company called Engine 2 and spreading the word about plant-based science. Another person I love is Josh LaJohny. I don't know if you know him, but just look at the demographic of this guy. He lived in a trailer in the Louisiana bayou, blue collar, poor. He heard about plant-based science. He was more than 400 and something pounds of obesity and other health issues, and he adopted the plant-based lifestyle and completely reinvented himself. So if someone from that demographic can get it and embrace it, I'm like, whoa, this is cool. Another person I like is Erica Gray. I don't know if you know his story, but when I look at the picture on the left, that's a family member of mine. I have a family member who looks almost exactly like that, and I'm thinking, whoa, if that's my family member on the left and he could potentially look like the one on the right, I need to share this story. And I love his story because he was prescribed a plant-based diet plus a shelter dog to get up and get out and get moving. And then finally, the one I love the most, don't even know Rich Roll. I like Rich because he was a cardiovascular diseased Ivy League trained attorney out of the Bay Area, who then became a culture-shifting Ironman. So he is now rethinking his paradigm shifting this whole societal attitudes about food. He has a blog and a podcast series that's absolutely fascinating. He's not just pushing plant-based science, he's pushing thinkers in all kinds of areas to shift society, thinking about better ways for us to live. But plant-based science is a big thing for him, and his sign-off is always peace plants. He's a cool guy. So, and I've also got testimonials from people here in our community in this room. So thank you for those of you that were willing to share your story with us. It's inspirational to have people in my own backyard want to share and let us know and inspire us. So thank you for sharing that with us. And I'm seeing professional athletes excelling. There are Olympians out there excelling on plant-based diets. Derek Morgan, Tennessee Titan, his wife is a professional chef. She discovered items to jump in. And so now in 1988 in Seoul, he was running everybody down and no one realized he was a plant-based eater, right? So he was well before the time of understanding nutritional science. So these are people I admire greatly. So I've learned a lot of health-related science through this journey. And so now what I'd like to do is share some of that science with you. So lifespan and health span, I didn't know there was a difference. So lifespan is how long we live. Health span is how healthy and vibrant we are during that time. And most cases, for most of us, that health span doesn't equal our lifespan because of disease and illness. And the biggest reason it doesn't match up is because of diet and lifestyle. Now, there are 3 diseases, the top 3 diseases that are killing us are cardiovascular disease, cancer, and diabetes. And the biggest driver for them is diet and lifestyle. Let's look at each of these three and see what we can uncover. So cardiovascular disease. I learned that 1 in 3 people in our nation succumbs to this disease before the end of their natural lifespan. More than 300,000 people a year are dying of cardiovascular disease. I learned that kids, even by the age of 10, showing the early stages of this disease. It's called atherosclerosis. So kids by the age of 10, so it's not a disease of old people, everybody's getting it. And I even learned that Olympians are dropping dead of this disease. I don't know if you know Sergei Grinkov from the famous Russian ice skating pair. He was training for his 3rd Olympics. He was 28. It was at Lake Placid. He dropped dead right there on the ice rink while he was training. He didn't even hit the ice and he was gone, completely gone. So what's the culprit? Plaque. Plaque is made up of a number of substances. And let's just focus on cholesterol for a moment. So we make cholesterol. It's an essential metabolic fat. We consider cholesterol the enemy when in fact we shouldn't. It's how we manage that fat that's the problem. So cholesterol is made in our livers, and our body is smart enough to know how much we need, when we need it, without us even thinking about it. It just does it on its own. The problem comes into play when we consume cholesterol from an external source. And cholesterol is only found in one category of foods. Does anyone know what it is?
Animal foods.
Animal foods, because animals make cholesterol in their livers. It's just science. So when we understand where that cholesterol comes from an external source, when we stop putting it in our bodies will naturally re-regulate themselves. It may take 3, 5, 6, 7 months, depending on our own individual makeup. But the bottom line is that the first thing we should be instructed to do is stop consuming foods that contain cholesterol. Let's see if our bodies naturally re-regulate. For most of us, they will. Maybe a small percentage of us will actually need a legitimate medication to manage our cholesterol. But for 99% of it, it's not even necessary. We just need to stop eating external cholesterol. Now, I learned that there's a difference between good fats and bad fats. Like, what? I thought fat was fat. What's the big deal here? Okay, good fats are ones that are beneficial for us, and our body can metabolize them. They're not damaging to us when we consume them. And bad fats are damaging, and our body can't handle it. And what makes the difference between a good fat and a bad fat is the structure of the fat molecule. So how the bonds, carbon, nitrogen, oxygen bonds change. So some fats can be manipulated by man, such as trans fats. And trans fats, as you know, for processed foods, allow foods to be stable at room temperature without going rancid. But our body can't handle that fat, and that's why it's damaging to us. Yes?
I have a question. In the middle, it has olive oil in the middle, I guess?
Yeah, hang tight. Yeah. And then I learned about oils. And notice these are vegetable oils. So I learned that oils are not a good thing. It's a processed food. If we're going to have a fat, have a beneficial plant-based fat, but it must be in its intact form. So either the nut, the avocado, the seed, that kind of thing, not as a processed product. That's the best way to get your fat. And then finally, I learned about nitric oxide. I learned about the physiology of our blood vessels, and that inside lining of our blood vessels is called the endothelial lining. And those cells work best when they're fed a constant stream of nitric oxide, which tends to come from dark leafy green vegetables. That's nitric oxide magic, and all the chemistry things that go on allow us to keep a very elastic, smooth lining of the blood vessel and stop it snagging and catching cholesterol crystals and all other nasty stuff. So we need a good dose of nitric oxide from leafy greens to keep that endothelial lining healthy. Now let's move on to cancer. So cancer. I learned that 25% of us succumb to cancer before the end of our natural lifespan. 25%. Now, we know some cancers are genetic, a small portion of them, but the bulk of the cancers that we suffer from are diet and lifestyle related. So let's explore some of those and see what we learn from that. So what have we been told we have to do to not get skin cancer?
Stay out of the sun.
Stay out of the sun, right, wear long sleeve clothing, big hats, that kind of stuff. And then what have we been told to not get lung cancer?
Don't smoke.
Don't smoke, right? And don't get exposed to tobacco products. And then we have down at the bottom colorectal cancer. Now that's a cancer of the digestive system. So clearly chances are it's something we're eating that is causing the problem. Any idea what category of foods might be the biggest contributor? It's meat, okay? So processed meats and cooked meats. So here's the science. The World Health Organization back in 2015 figured out through what happened was there were over 800 studies going on worldwide, and they were reporting their data into the World Health Organization. And someone in the WHO discovered, whoa, these all have a common thread. What the heck's going on here? So they did another meta-analysis with those studies and cleaned out some of the data because they wanted to be absolutely rigorous. But to cut a long story short, they figured out that in fact, processed meats, so ham, bacon, pepperoni, those kinds of products, they are in essence a group 1 carcinogen on the same level as tobacco and asbestos. And then when you cook meat, braise it, broil it, barbecue it, grill it, those kinds of methods, those are in fact a level 2A carcinogen, so comparable to glyphosate, which is the primary compound in Roundup. Now you may notice that the meats that were in the study were pork, beef, and lamb, so what about chicken and fish? So it's been inferred that because they have similar comparable molecular structures in terms of the flesh, that they will probably have a carcinogenic effect as well. And what are the culprits? They're called HCAs and PAHs, heterocyclic amines and polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons. Bottom line is those are the nasty compounds that are produced when we process meats. So when we cook or process a meat, these compounds are produced, and those are the carcinogen. We're going to talk more about this a little bit later, so hang tight on meat and cancer. Okay, the next disease we've all been suffering from is diabetes. And as we know, there are 2 types of diabetes, and I had no clue that type 2 was completely reversible. And I had no clue that type 2 used to have a different name. It used to be called adult onset diabetes. Mm-hmm. So that implies what? Only adults get it. Then why did they change the name? Because more and more young people are getting it. So wouldn't that raise a red flag for all the people managing this disease, to try and encourage us to adopt the science?
There's also a type 3 diabetes.
There's now a 3?
For the brain nutrition. Deprivation.
Okay, didn't know that one, so now we need to add another one. So, but we can eliminate it with diet. So, and I heard that sugar and fat is the problem. So sugar, we eat a lot of highly processed refined foods, don't we? We love that stuff in the Western diet. And then we also like our high fat foods. So our fried foods, our animal-based foods are inherently loaded with fat. You combine those meal after meal after meal, and that creates the toxic cocktail that leads to diabetes, because fat stops the insulin from doing its magic to open up the door to allow sugar to get in the cell, which is why it builds up in the bloodstream. So it's that high sugar, high fat combo. So the Western diet is wrought with processed and refined foods and animal foods, and that leads to type 2 diabetes. And then finally, it's not about calories. Well, I count calories, I'm slim, but you can be counting your calories and you can be rail thin and you can still get type 2 diabetes simply because of the sugar-fat combo. It's got nothing to do with calories. And I fell into that trap thinking I was just managing my calories, so why was I pre-diabetic? And it wasn't until I figured that out that I was able to manage it. Let's move on to obesity. So this is another ailment we suffer from, a lifestyle-related disease. Now, back in 1985, you can see if this data is collected by the Centers for Disease Control, and you can see as a nation, we weren't too bad. Texas was looking pretty good, and most of the other nations weren't looking too bad. Now, let's look at what happens just 10 years later. And now 10 more years later. Okay? And now 10 more years later. So now we're up to 35, and then 2016, 2017, the 2018 data isn't released yet. So now the healthiest states are Colorado and Hawaii at almost 25% obesity, and we've got a number of states at more than 35%. And this is our normal. This is our normal. This is what we as a nation are, it's just our normal. Okay? So, but look at our attitudes and mindset around food. Okay? We admire someone, we admire people who can eat 25 hot dogs in 3 minutes. We think they're cool. Or they can stick their face in the pie in a pie eating contest. This is our culture and attitudes and mindset around food. If you go to Las Vegas, they even celebrate cardiovascular disease in a restaurant called the Heart Attack Grill. The waitresses dress up like nurses. If you look at this menu, they have the octuple bypass burger that has 40 slices of bacon on it. I mean, and you have to pay in cash because you may have a heart attack before your credit card clears. And people think this is cool, and they say to me, Carol, just stop being so serious, lighten up. And I said, but this is just indicative of the attitudes and mindset as a nation we have around food. Hello, come on, wake up. We vilify and bully people, myself included, for trying to be healthy and do yoga and Pilates and other things to be healthy. You know, I'm considered an outlier. I'm a problem, right? That's how bad the system is and how warped our mindset and attitudes are around food. Now, 2030 is only 10 and a half years away. So what do you think that number's going to be if we continue to have this mindset and attitudes, and this is our normal around food? What do you think that number's going to be?
60.
Personally, I think it will be well over 50% if we continue on this path that we're leading. All right, let's move on to osteoporosis. Now, as most of us know, that's the degeneration of our bones over time. And what have we been told to do to combat that? Consume lots of dairy products because they contain calcium. Okay, cool. Did you know that Americans consume per capita the most amounts of milk and dairy products of any Western nation? Okay, cool. Pat ourselves on the back. We're paying attention to the messaging. But we also have the highest rates of osteoporosis of any Western nation. Like, what? That doesn't make sense. Well, the very smart dudes at Harvard University went off and did some studies because that raised a red flag for them. And to cut a long story short, they figured out that dairy is in fact part of the problem. Okay? So what's going on? So let's look at the science of milk. So we're a mammal, right? Mammals consume milk. Why do mammals consume milk? Because in utero, Mother Nature said it was more important for brain and central nervous system to get prioritization. We'll get you started on your digestive system. You're going to finish it off, development of it, after you're born. So you're born with no teeth, tummy can't handle solid food, and you get nourishment from your mom until your teeth come in, and you get weaned on applesauce and mashed potatoes, and then solid foods. Cows no different, all these other mammals are no different, so all mammals do the same thing, right? Now, have you noticed we're the only mammal that consumes milk beyond infancy? You see grown-up dogs doing it? Grown-up horses? We don't, do we?
Cats.
And have you also known cats do it? That's a good one. But where do cats get their milk from? People give it to them, right? So we're giving it to them as a pet, not as a scientific need for them to have that product. Okay. And have you also noticed we're the only mammal that consumes the milk of another mammal? Do you see goats drinking milk from sheep? Or antelope drinking milk from zebra out in the Serengeti Plains? We don't see that, do we? Okay? So if we need milk, okay, cool, I get in a message that we need milk. Surely the milk of my own species would be the best milk for me. So why can't I go home and get milk from, just, hey mom, or any next door neighbor, we need milk, right? Okay, we can't, right? So why? So what's going on here? When do women produce milk? When they're pregnant. So scientifically, mammals only produce milk when they're pregnant or when they have a baby. So what does that scientifically tell us about when we need milk? We only need it when we're a baby, right? So here's some other science I learned about milk. I learned that milk, or dairy products in general, are loaded with hormones. Okay? Hormones of just being a cow. She's a 900 to 1,200 pound animal, and just for her to be a cow, she's got her own set of hormones that she deals with. Growth hormones, unless you drink organic milk or organic cheese, all dairy animals are injected with a capsule in their ear for growth hormones to maximize milk yields. That's why her udders expand or explode to huge proportions. Sex hormones are obviously cranking at high gear because a cow has to be pregnant or just had a baby in order to produce milk for us humans to consume. So that's cranking through the system and therefore the product that we consume. And then stress hormones. Anybody that knows and understands how the dairy industry works knows that it's profoundly stressful for a dairy cow to be constantly milked and have her udders engorged, where it's profoundly painful and a baby taken away from her constantly. But it's the only way the dairy industry works. It's just science, it's just the way it is. But you put all those hormones in a product, and then you multiply. Typically, it takes 10 cups of milk to produce 1 cup of cheese. So that concentrates all of that stuff, and we love our cheese, don't we? I did, loved it in the day. And I wondered why I had my ear infections and that little throat clearing cough, and my skin would break out, and all this. This is wreaking havoc with my endocrine system. So no wonder I had all kinds of messy things going on. The other science of milk that's really cool is lactose intolerance. So 65% of humans have an intolerance to some degree of milk, and I did too, and I didn't know it till I stopped consuming dairy. But lactose intolerance is Mother Nature's way of saying, hey, this product isn't designed for you, stop, don't go there. So maybe if we respected the science for what it is, we wouldn't have concerns and issues around dairy. So it starts to beg the question, so okay, I need calcium, and I'm told I need to get calcium from dairy, so where did the cow get her calcium from?
Grass.
Right, she eats grass, which is a plant, And so if I avoid the cow and go straight, I avoid all of these health issues that come with consuming dairy, and I go straight to the plant to get my calcium, I can get a healthier form of calcium with no problem. Now, one more thing we need for good bone health, actually two things. Exercise and physical activity. We need weight-bearing exercise, and we also need sunshine to get vitamin D. So it's been shown in nations like Peru and Japan, they have much, much less dietary calcium loads than we do, but because they're outdoorsy, active cultures, they have much lower levels of osteoporosis than we do here in America. So it's not about going home and sitting in front of the TV and eating Costco-sized bags of broccoli and thinking your bone problem's going to go away, your osteoporosis is going to go away. You've got to be active, you've got to have weight-bearing exercise, and get some vitamin D on a regular basis. One more cool thing, science about dairy. Why can't we give up our cheese? Most of us love our cheese, and I was one of them. And so I'm like, what's going on here? Why do I like my cheese so much? And here's what's going on. Casein and whey are the predominant proteins in cheese. And when we consume them, we produce, or the enzymes in our body produce a compound called casomorphine. And as we know, what's morphine? It's an addictive thing, right? And morphine, casomorphine is produced because that's what brings a baby back to mom to continue to nurse. So that helps ensure the next generation will grow up big and strong and all that good stuff. So when we can concentrate casomorphine in cheese, because remember 10 cups of milk produces 1 cup of cheese, that's why we're addicted to cheese, because this casomorphine is just pulling us back, keeps pulling us back, keeps pulling us back. Okay, what else did I learn? So all of these diseases we've been talking about are preventable and reversible simply by eating plants. So all of these problems that we have, they'll all go away if we just eat plants. I've also learned something about phytonutrients. So most of us in high school learned about protein, fat, and carbohydrate as the macronutrients, and vitamins and minerals were the micronutrients, right? I had no clue about phytonutrients, phyto meaning plant, and they're magnificent little molecules, and here are 4 examples of them. And they get inside our body, and they create a defensive mechanism that when things like cancer come calling, give us a better chance to fight it off. So they're nature's natural defense system. So when you hear the term eat a rainbow every day, it really matters. Eat a rainbow every day, and you'll have a natural defensive mechanism being built up in all the cells of your body. Okay, here's some other cool stuff I learned about the physiology. So maybe if we clue into how our bodies are designed, it might give us a good idea of the kinds of foods that we should be eating. Right? So we know that humans and lions are both mammals, right? And so most people think, well, lions can eat meat, therefore I can eat meat because we're both mammals. But if we start to peel away the physiology and look at the science a little bit more closely, we'll in fact find that that is not in fact the case. So let's just look at the teeth, for example. So yes, we both have canines, quote unquote, but we also drive cars. Now, is a Honda the same as a Ferrari? Okay, but it's both a car. Okay? So the canines on a lion have a completely different purpose than the canines in a human, even though they're named the same thing. So I used to get sucked into that one big time, think, well, justifies why you eat. Now the molars in a human go on top of each other. If you bite down on your teeth right now, you'll notice they go on top of each other. But in a lion, they go side to side like scissors do. So they're for slicing and cutting things apart. Okay? Their jaws, lion jaws, only move up and down. You notice some of you in this room are chewing gum. Yours go side to side. Lions only go up and down, and the reason being is when they have their top canines and their bottom canines come together, sinking into prey, they've got those big muscles in the side of their face that can clamp down on that prey, and because their jaw doesn't go side to side, that locking mechanism kicks in and they can hold onto that prey and bring it to the ground. If their jaws could go side to side, the wrestling of that zebra or whatever animal this is fighting for its life would rip their jaw apart. So that's why their jaws only go up and down. So bottom line is our teeth are different. If you look at the length of our small intestines, so in humans, it's 9 to 20 times our body length, and body length is from the shoulders to the hips, exclude the appendages, and in a lion, it's from the withers to the hips. A lion's gut is very short, only 2 to 3 times. So this piece of string here is the size of our small intestine. So if you want to pass that around, just hold it up. Whoa, that's the average length of a human small intestine. That's a really long pipe. We'll come back to that in just a minute. Notice we also have a very long digestion time, 12 to 48 hours for each meal that we eat. And lions have a very short digestion time. So think about what lions eat. They go out there, they wrestle a zebra to the ground. It's covered in muck and filth. They'll eat half of that zebra for their meal. Lions typically only eat every 2 to 3 days. They'll drag the rest of the carcass under a bush and sleep nearby to protect that food source. A couple of days later, they come back and eat meal number 2. Meanwhile, it's been festering in the Serengeti heat, now covered in maggots and other nasty whatevers, and they eat it no problem. But they have a very short digestion time and a very short transit time, so if they did inadvertently eat something that was bad for them, they can eliminate it from their body. But notice we can't do that. And notice lions, all they do is eat meat. They don't have a cholesterol problem, do they? Okay, but when we eat meat, our cholesterol goes through the roof. So clearly we're not able to metabolize it effectively, and they are. So in fact, humans are closer to being herbivores, and a lion is a legitimate carnivore. Now, when we look at humans and meat, if we eat it raw, it contains pathogens, except for sushi and carpaccio, but look how meticulously they have to manage that raw meat in order for us to be safely eat it. Okay, so in general, raw meat for humans is pathogenic, and as we've now learned with the science I explained earlier, it's carcinogenic. So what does that scientifically tell us about whether we should be eating meat or not? We can, and we do, to the tune of over 160 pounds on average per person, but it's doing us no good. Now, meat is a known carcinogen. Meal after meal after meal, we love our pork tacos for breakfast, our ham sandwich for lunch, and our pepperoni for pizza. So 3 times a day, we're putting a type 1 or type 2 carcinogen in our body, and we have a very long gut with a slow digestion time. So wonder why? There's a good chance that my cervical cancer came from my meat eating habit back then. So when I start to put the connection between my physiology and the kinds of foods and how it goes through my body, now I can start to understand more scientifically why the types of foods I was eating were probably not doing me any good. Right, now we need fiber to push things along. This is a long pipe. And to get the start, this is just a part of the pipe. So to get things from the start line to the finish line, clearly we need a lot of fiber to push things along that pipe. And fiber stimulates the muscles in our intestinal tract, peristalsis is the name of it, and that pushes things along and gets it from the start to the finish line. That's why humans need a lot of fiber, and we get that from plant foods. Because animal foods contain 0 fiber. There is no fiber in animal foods. So if someone eats a heavy animal-based diet, they are not getting enough fiber, and that's why constipation and hemorrhoids and those other intestinal issues come up. Now we also need fiber in the form of complex carbs for 3 more things. To stabilize our blood sugar, fiber helps us with that. We also absorb toxins and eliminate them from our body. So we're inadvertently absorbing toxins every day. When we put a lotion on our body, any kind of chemical that touches our skin, in some microscopic way can be toxic to us. We could eliminate through the air we're breathing, we walk by a nuclear power plant, whatever it is, whatever the excuses are. But bottom line is our body uses fiber to help eliminate some of those toxins from our body. And then finally, feed our microbiome, our gut bacteria. We've got a whole lot of happy little guys down there doing some amazing work for us, and we need to nurse them and feed them, and the way we do that is with complex carbs. And if you really want to learn some more, I highly recommend you read this book. Absolutely fascinating. I Contain Multitudes by Ed Yong. It will go deep into not only the gut biome, but why microbes across all spectrums of living, from how we're born to all different kinds of aspects of human engagement with the planet. It's fascinating, fascinating book. Highly recommend. I was clueless on it until I took this journey. So, do I need to eat meat to get protein? Well, I thought, we've got to do that. That's the only way you get good protein. So, I didn't know where protein came from. I used to think it came from animals until I learned that only plants can make protein and that make or assemble the amino acids. And they do it by taking the nitrogen, oxygen, and carbon from the atmosphere and from the soil and using that to create the appropriate amino acid in that given plant. And then animals consume the plant and assemble those amino acids to create proteins based on whatever protein our body needs at the time of consumption. So that takes care of that myth. So the bottom line is the protein fact is that amino acids are made by plants, not by animals. So the next myth was I need to eat meat to get good quality protein. So like we had the calcium thing, so where did the cow get his protein from?
Grass.
Right, so he eats grass, and grass is a plant, and if I bypass the cow, I bypass all the nutritional negatives that come with that cow, namely cholesterol, saturated fat, it's a carcinogen, all those nasty hormones we've talked about, no fiber and no phytonutrients. And if I go straight to the plant, I get all good quality protein that I need. I just need to eat a broad spectrum, nice assortment of plant foods, and my body gets all the protein it needs. So protein myth is protein sourced from plants is healthier for us. Okay, protein myth number 3, I'm not getting enough good protein. Do any of you know anybody in this country who suffers from kwashiorkor? So kwashiorkor is the disease of protein deficiency. If you're getting enough calories, which on the standard American diet we automatically do, okay, you're automatically getting enough protein. So it's a myth that you have to have, that we're not getting enough protein, you have to have more protein. So adequate calories will give you adequate protein. It's that simple.
And that's why the belly's big, because of protein deficiency.
Correct. That's the classic indicator of a human who has kwashiorkor. Yes, the belly distension. Okay, one more protein fact or myth. More protein is better for me. We're being marketed out the wazoo that we need to have more protein. Protein is, more protein is good for us. That is scientifically incorrect, okay? Here's what happens. First of all, if we're consuming enough calories, the excess protein that we consume is not converted into energy and stored in our body somewhere for us to use later. Our bodies say, you've got enough calories? Fine. So all you're going to do is pass it out through your urine. So it's basically you're flushing it down the toilet. It's a waste of money. Okay, your body will not store it unless you are deprived of enough calories, which all of us on the Western diet never seem to be. So that's problem number 1. Problem number 2 is excess protein contributes to kidney disease. Our kidneys can process excess protein through our urine, but not to an excessive amount that happens in the Western diet where we're so obsessed with more protein. So that's why we have statistically higher rates of kidney disease and kidney failure and those problems going on, because our kidneys are just overloaded with trying to handle protein processing. And then finally, cancer. If you're familiar with the insulin growth factor 1 hormone, IGF-1, insulin growth factor is a hormone that all of us have. Teenagers have it cranked up to high gear because it's what gets them through puberty. It's one of the metabolic pathways that allows the body to regulate cell production and crank it up to high gear to build body mass and all that kind of stuff. And for us adults in this room, it's humming away quietly in the background and cranks up to high gear when we injure ourselves. And it's also there monitoring just general cell replication. As we know, most of the cells in our body die off every 90, 120 days, whatever it is. But what happens when we have excess protein load is scientists have figured out that excess protein load cranks IGF-1 and it goes rogue. And in us, it starts looking around for mutated cells, which happens automatically as part of cell division. And normally our immune system would kick in and take care of that, no problem. And what I learned is that IGF-1 cranks up and latches onto those little mutated cells, and that's how our tumors come about. We have statistically higher rates of soft tissue cancers in communities where excess protein load is happening. So excess protein damages our body and is a waste of money. Yes?
Does that include animal-based protein and plant-based protein?
Just protein in general, yes. Any protein, yes. It just so happens that when you get it from plant sources, because you fill up on fiber and all the other things, we get enough and we don't tend to go into the overload category. Now, some other concepts I've learned. The concept between reductionism and holism. And this was a cool book I read this from, and I'll show it to you in a minute. So here on the left I have some vitamin C pills, and let's say they're 10 milligrams of vitamin C. This was a cool thing I learned. And let's say the apple has 10 milligrams of vitamin C in it. Now if I consume the apple, that vitamin C will be more metabolically available to my body than if I consume it in the form of a pill. And so the scientists have figured that out. They're still trying to do detailed science to understand how, but the bottom line is all of those other molecules that come in that apple allow that vitamin C to work their magic. They all work together to allow that vitamin C to be more metabolically available for my body. So bottom line is Mother Nature is giving us the package that we should get that vitamin C in rather than in the form of a pill. So yes, we all take multivitamins and all this stuff and we're pushed to do that on a regular basis, but the bottom line is this should be the priority for getting those kinds of products, nutrients. Yes, the vitamin C is a backup plan, but the predominant way to get it is in the form of a whole plant food. And this is the book where I learned that. So T. Colin Campbell's whole book on whole, fascinating book if you haven't read it. Put it on your summer reading list. Food matters. Next thing I learned, whole food in general. So over on the left, we have the food that we should be ideally eating. And as you can see, as we continue to process that food, it has less and less nutrient availability to us because the food manufacturers got their hands on it. Clearly, a whole grain of wheat has much more nutrient availability to us than if we process the bejeebas out of it. So bottom line is, whole food in as close to its natural state as possible gives our body the best opportunity to leverage all of those nutrients to our benefit. Here's another concept of reductionism that's interesting. How many of us have heard that they did a study last week on food X, and now all of a sudden they're blasting it through social media and the TV and stuff that now we should eat food this way, or eggs are now back in the good column and all that kind of stuff, right? If you dive deep into the studies and what they're doing, they're not applying these 5 principles. And the 5 principles, I'm going to let this just scroll through, but the bottom line is if we don't do studies that have these 5 pillars in them, the rigor of that data is not sound, and therefore we should probably not align with what's going on. Chances are what's happening is whatever organization or institution or thing or company has done the study and funded it is just trying to get some kind of data out there that sounds good, that may encourage us to lean towards buying their product and all that kind of stuff. But if you dig deep and understand how they did the study, if it didn't align to these 5 principles, chances are it is not good, sound data. And I used to get sucked into that big time. Oh, now eggs are back in. I'll go back and start eating eggs again. That kind of stuff was going on. So I was on this constant revolving door of, food's good 1 month, and then no, another study, it's back in the good column again. I learned the difference between calories and nutrients. So in calories, I was told, and here's what I was focusing on for decades, if I balance my inputs with my outputs, I'm not going to gain weight. I've got my problem solved. That's all I need to do. And then I learned about nutrients and the aggregate nutrient density index, which you may have heard about. And this book right here, I highly recommend you get it. I'm going to pass it around. It's a tiny little booklet, and I have 2 of them. I have one in my car, and I have one in my kitchen at home. And in there, if you want to pass it around, is the aggregate nutrient index for dozens, hundreds of different types of foods. It's a score from 0 to 1,000 and allows us to understand the nutrient density of a given food, factoring in the negatives as well as the positives. So whether it contains good compounds, cholesterol, not so good, right? Or not, that kind of thing. So obviously oil and sugar at the very bottom of the chart, and believe it or not, kale, broccoli, dark leafy green vegetables are at the very top. So I learned all about this and the concept of nutritarian. I was really big into that when I first made the plant-based journey, because it made me focus on making choices based on their nutritional value versus their caloric value. So here's an interesting thing that Dr. Furman did. If you have an ounce of broccoli and an ounce of beef per calorie, which one has the most amount of protein?
Broccoli.
It's the broccoli, right. So when you factor in the formula, health, nutrition divided by calories, then you can see where your optimum nutrient load comes from. So I highly recommend this book. Add it to your little library. Food matters. I learned about the difference between a diet and a lifestyle. I'm the world expert on diets, trust me, I've done them all to some degree. And diets focus on calories, measuring your weight, checking your size, it's some kind of restriction or containment of some sort, and it's temporary, because that's what diets are, right? They're temporary. And then I learned about the concept of lifestyle, which is focusing on nutrients and health and vitality and abundance, okay? And it's ongoing and sustainable. I mean, have you noticed we're the only animal on the planet that doesn't seem to know what to eat? It's weird, isn't it? Okay, because we're all focused on trying to solve a problem. We go into the diet bucket, and I went there umpteen dozens of times over the decades. It wasn't until I adhered to the concept of lifestyle. I need to find an eating method that aligns to the science that is the best way for me to sustain over my lifetime, and so lifestyle. So diets don't work. So food matters in order to have a lifestyle. I also learned the difference between refueling and renourishing. I used to get into triathlons. That was one way I was managing my weight, as you heard about very early. And I would finish a triathlon and come back and eat a cheeseburger, and then I'd have French fries and maybe apple pie with avocado and a milkshake, thinking, wow, I burned it off from the half Ironman, so I can eat that. And I was focusing on calories, but my knees still ached. The inflammation was there, and I'd need a massive nap to digest that, because that load of food I'd eaten was toxic to my body. That's why we nap after eating a Western meal, because our bodies are like overwhelmed with trying to digest this stuff. and I had slow recovery times. I would be sore and stiff and achy after a half Ironman for weeks, and I could never understand why. And then I learned about re-nourishing. If I feed my body nutrients, I won't get inflammation, and I won't need naps to digest the food. I'm napping because I'm building and rebuilding my body using those nutrients, and I had much faster recovery times. I was back in the pool probably in 2 or 3 days after doing a half Ironman, and back running and biking within 5 or 6 days, after I learned the concept of re-nourishing. Food matters. I learned the difference between vegan and whole food plant-based. So vegans don't eat animals and animal products, and neither do plant-based eaters, right? But vegans will eat highly processed foods and junk foods. That's okay for them. It meets their criteria for being a vegan. But whole foods plant-based eaters, minimal processing at best, ideally whole, and that's where we get the maximum amount of nutrients. So there is a subtle difference between a vegan and a plant-based eater. So food matters. I also learned the difference between genes and lifestyle. Now, my dad's been nagging me for probably about 6 or 8 years now. Carol, you're in your 50s. You need to go get your doctor. You need to start taking a baby aspirin and get your statins going, because you're going to have a heart attack like your grandfather did. My grandfather owned a slaughterhouse and died in his early 70s of a heart attack. And then his wife, my grandmother, died of a stroke. And my dad's had stents and cholesterol issues, and he's been on these drugs for a long time. And I told him, all I need to do is just stop eating foods that contain cholesterol. And guess what happened? I used to have cholesterol in the high 190s, low 200s. And all I did was change my eating habits. So I didn't inherit a genetics problem. I inherited a lifestyle of indoctrination as to foods that I should be eating. That was the difference.
Okay, just a few months ago, they had this report out saying that it's not good to take an aspirin a day.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah? Maybe aspirin, yeah.
It didn't say.
There's more side effects.
Yeah, too many side effects. It
Yeah.
said, stay away from it.
Yeah, all kinds of stuff going on. So I also learned about this concept called epigenetics. Anyone heard about it? Where external factors in food we eat influence how our genes behave. They get expressed is the term we use. I had no clue about this kind of stuff. And then nutritional epigenetics is the food that we eat and how it influences our genes and the gene behavior. Bottom line is we have a lot of control if we change what we eat. And a fascinating book to read is The Telomere Effect, and this is the one that talks about aging. But again, food influences how our telomeres work and how they age. So genes are impacted by what we eat. So if you have genetic tendencies, start exploring food and genes and see what happens. Food matters. I also learned the difference between pills and food. Now, most people understand the concept of you ingest a pill and the body responds, right? I've got a family rampant on dozens and dozens of medications, and they're obsessed with making sure they take their pills because their pills are going to work, okay? So they understand the concept of ingesting something and it doing something in the body. But then when you try to explain to them, well, if you ingest a food, wouldn't the food do something for your body too? You're ingesting something. It's not a pill, but it's a food, and that could be a positive or a negative thing, right? They just don't want to go there, okay? They just they just can't go there. So what's going on? Why can't I get through to my family or anyone else that has this influence? And so I found and discovered there are other factors influencing food choices. And they're absolutely mind-boggling. So taste, the salt, sugar, and chemicals that are in processed foods, that pulls us in. Tradition, we always have red velvet cake on Grandma's birthday. We gotta have red velvet cake on Grandma's birthday, so we just gotta do it, right? And then we have culture, what we do in America at Thanksgiving and Halloween and the kinds of foods that we eat. So we've got those cultural drivers. Faith-based cultures drive food choices. Convenience, okay, heat and eat, fast food and packaging and so on. Geography, simply by where we're born and how we're raised, what country we belong to, dictates and drives food choices and what's appropriate to eat and not. Price, ag subsidies are distorting the system and bringing some products to our table at a price. I mean, when you can get super burgers with fries and stuff for $4 for family of 4, it's insane. But we understand why that prompts people to want to buy that product. Profit, the McDonald's Happy Meal, they're willing to sell that for $4 because it builds a lifetime of addicted customers. And then finally, policy. The My Plate program is a good example. Bottom line is, all of these drivers are not based on science. We're ignoring the science. We're being pulled in and lured by some other mechanism. Now, I used to go around saying, well, I can eat what I want because I'm not impacting anybody else, until someone sat me down and put a hard finger in front of my face and told me, Carol, don't work that way. Because when you eat something and you're sick, think about it, that impacts your family members, because they got to come in to rally and help you when you're sick, you're in your bed, whatever, right? And then your neighbors may pitch in to help out. And then maybe your office co-workers jump in and cover a shift for you because you were absent that week or that day, okay? And then the community at large that you belong to and the nation as a whole. Look at our healthcare expenses and the other burdens that we have. So eating, it's a social responsibility and you're not doing it in isolation. And that's a moral obligation that I now feel that I need to be the best that I can be in order to not be negatively impacting all of these other people in my bigger circle. Have you noticed we don't align to the natural world? We're the only species that doesn't know what to eat. We're the only species that is obese. We're the only species that goes on diets. We're the only species that has chronic health issues. And we're the only species that foods cause disease. And who eat foods that are not produced by nature. That one got me. It's like, whoa, yeah, that's really true. So maybe we've got some problems going on there that are contributing to the problem. Now, Western medicine versus functional lifestyle medicine. This was an interesting one because I've been making choices of my physicians based on a misunderstanding. So Western medicine, if you have a problem, they home in on it, okay? To the expense of not looking at anything else on your body. They're just tuned into that one problem. Whereas lifestyle medicine, they look at your entire body as one collective unit, right? They holistically look at everything as connected. So Western medicine focuses on fixing a symptom, whereas functional lifestyle medicine focuses on fixing root causes. Western medicine tends to have meds end up being a permanent part of managing that problem, whereas in functional medicine, meds are transitional. They may give you a medication just to help you out, but their whole goal is to get you off that med. You are not considered well by a functional physician until you're completely off those meds. That is the ultimate goal. So we've got managed care, or managed health, versus true health. So I used to go to physicians that are in the left-hand side. I've now made an informed change, and I now seek out physicians like Dr. Carney that we know and love here in this group. Okay? I seek out physicians who practice with this approach to healthcare, because this is ultimately where I want to be. I don't want to be on meds. I don't want to be maintained by a med. I want to, if I got a problem, okay, give me a med if I need it, but ultimately get me off that med. That's true health, and that's what their goal is. Then I dove deeper and learned a little bit more about Western medicine. I found that very little nutritional biochemistry is taught to physicians in our healthcare system, coming through the training programs. And that there's no federal level certification or specialty for nutrition. So you can have an obstetrician, a gynecologist, an oncologist and all that stuff, but there is no, at the doctor level, a certification. Now there's a registered dietitian, but that's not at the same level. And unfortunately, most of the RD training programs are sponsored by guess who? Right, so they come in, right, yeah. So the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine recognizes these problems, and many of them are trying to work really hard on our behalf to try and get these systems changed. So we've got an endemic system that's a problem that we have to be prepared, be aware of, and consciously navigate around and through it as we make choices in how we manage our health. Now here's an interesting one, Hippocrates and the Hippocratic Oath. Okay, Hippocrates is famous for saying, let food be thy medicine and medicine be thy food. And then if you look at the Hippocratic Oath, one of the sentences says, I will prevent disease wherever I can, for prevention is preferable to cure. And then when you double that up with another statement in the Hippocratic Oath that says, I will not be ashamed to say I know not, nor will I fail to call my colleagues when the skills of another are needed for a patient's recovery. I didn't know about this until I went plant-based, and then someone brought it to my attention. And then I went to a doctor for a general checkup, and the doctor, and I brought some books and said, hey, look what I've learned. Here's some really cool stuff, and what do you think? And some doctors are just arrogant enough to just dismiss it and blow it off. And then I brought this statement up and said, well, you don't know something. Now, the Hippocratic Oath said that you would, if you don't know, you're going to bring in a colleague. So the moral and ethical attitudes about some physicians, their drivers for the way they practice their craft is maybe a little bit not where it needs to be. So I decided to go get a different physician who either, if they didn't know, they're like, oh, really? Show me what you got. And if they're willing to learn, I'm willing to continue to work with them and have them continue to be my physician. But now for my health, I'm smarter about how I select physicians based on this kind of dynamic that's playing out in our healthcare system and how they're trained. Another factor to influence our health is the economy. We've got big dairy, big ag, food manufacturers, etc., right? Their primary driver is what? Money. We know how it works. That's just market economics at play here. But it begs the question, okay, which is more profitable? Okay, beef or beans, insulin or asparagus, chemo or cauliflower, pills or peas. So when we start to look at the system for what it is, and just be prepared for the fact that there's going to be lots of financial motivators that we've got to be willing to navigate around when seeking support for a health issue that we may have. But I've noticed the more plant-based I am, the more grounded I am at a whole food plant-based lifestyle, the less I need to depend on this anyway. So that's probably a good thing until we get this changed. So something to think about there. Then you look at the power of advertising. So if you go back to that milk thing we talked about earlier, hey, why do we consume all this milk? Because the dairy industry spends $1 billion a year in ag subsidy money marketing to us that we need milk. Okay? And then when you look at all the other foods, so let's just talk about foods in general, what other types of foods do we see ads for? Okay? So this is typically the ads that we see in the food when we see on TV and media and so on. Okay? And it sort of begs the question, why don't we see ads for beans, broccoli, and brown rice? Right? Okay? Because market economics is driving. It's not as profitable as these other products, right? You can make Doritos and have them sit on a shelf in a warehouse for 6 months before bringing them to the grocery store. It's much more profitable for a food manufacturer to do that than to refrigerate beans and have a shorter supply chain dynamic to manage. So totally understandable, but the bottom line is this is what we're up against if we're trying to be healthy. Another thing we have to worry about, and I got smack in your face obvious version of this because I recently had family members in the hospital, but did you know most of our schools and our hospitals have a funding shortfall? They don't get enough tax money out of the local financial systems to fund what they need. So they pick up that shortfall by asking outside people to come in and help out. And it just so happens that food manufacturers love doing that. So they make up the shortfall, but now we've got McDonald's cafeteria and a hospital cafeteria. McDonald's restaurant and a hospital cafeteria. We have fast food vending machines in hallways. So we're building children with attitudes and mindsets that this is acceptable food to eat. And you find McDonald's in many school cafeterias. So we've got this whole dynamic going on and playing around that we got to navigate. And if you're raising children, this is a dynamic you struggle with probably every day, trying to encourage your kid to eat out of the lunchbox versus get sucked into what's in the vending machines in the school corridor. Public policy food guides. So in the United States, on the left-hand side, we have the MyPlate program, and on the right-hand side, we have the Canada equivalent of the MyPlate program. Notice on the left, a couple of the statements are fruits, grains, and vegetables, so you get an idea of what it is. But notice protein is protein, rather than an actual list of foods that contain protein that we should be eating. So if you do a Freedom of Information Act, allows us to go dive deep and find out who was behind the table when that policy was created. The bottom line, there were some nutritional scientist kind of people there, but there was also big ag and big pharma and the big food people pushing and shoving to get their say. And they went down a rat hole when it came to the protein section of the plate. They said, well, just leave it at protein, that'll even guess it. And they won't really know what source is good protein and what's bad, but at least we got protein on the plate. Whereas Canada says, we're going to go visceral. Now, they still have some animal foods on there, but it's much, 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 much less, the predominant stuff. And notice this is water, not dairy, as we learned about dairy science. So at least Canada's now realized that we don't want that on there. So this is a much more consumer-friendly way to understand the MyPlate and give better guidance. So we need to understand that dynamic as well. Now, so doubt and confusion are critical strategies in food manufacturing, in all others things in play in our society. So you've probably heard many of these statements, and I got pulled into these over the decades. And it wasn't until I finally stopped and said, I'm not going there anymore. I realized these are what they are, and it's to drive. It's a business-driven motivator for this, what's going on here, and I need to be consciously aware of it and make scientifically informed choices when I see this kind of messaging. So public policy, we have over $20 billion a year in ag subsidies, most of it supporting the livestock sector. And we also have things like the glyphosate program with Monsanto. In Europe, glyphosate is a banned substance. It's used predominantly in America to spray on crops prior to harvesting because it helps with desiccating the crop to facilitate the harvesting process. But as you saw in the earlier slide, it's a type 2A carcinogen. So, but it's banned in Europe, but we still have it here. So I've made a personal choice that corn, wheat, soy, and oats, I will only buy organic because they're the predominant crops that are sprayed with glyphosate prior to harvest to try and minimize my exposure to glyphosate. All of us have it in our bloodstream because of certain products that we eat, but I'm trying to minimize my exposure as best I can. But knowing this dynamic's going on, and being European, if you haven't figured that out already, you know, I can go to Europe and I can eat regular bread, no problem, because the crops over there are not sprayed with glyphosate. If I eat regular bread over here, I tend to get a bellyache or a migraine because of the chemicals that are sprayed on the crop. So finally, definition of healthy. So here on the right, this is how I used to drive my definition of healthy and how I manage. Those are the indicators and measures I was focused on. And then I learned a little bit more about, you know, you've got to go to the doctor and get your blood checked. And then you've got to exercise and, you know, make sure you're flexible. And then I learned about nutrients. And then I learned the importance of mental health and emotional health and spiritual health. And then the health of our planet as a whole. Bottom line, it all matters. You can't have one without the other. We can't have a sick planet and all be healthy because we won't have anywhere to live. Each and every single one of these components matters to have true optimal health. A couple more things, so can and should. So there are plenty of things we can do in America in terms of how we eat and stuff, right? So we can and we eat meat and dairy and all these processed foods, but should we be doing this, knowing what we know now? There is enough science out there to legitimately say, let's get on with this, let's do what we need to do the right thing. So now all those dots that I had before, they're starting to connect. And all those questions I had before, now I've got answers. And that three-legged stool, so now the health component of that three-legged stool and what we eat is really grounded. I'm really solid in that information. I can always come back and talk about the other two some other time. So the science we have is solid and should be leveraged, and I like using the airplane metaphor. Did we wait until we had Concorde before we started flying? No. As soon as the Wright brothers got us off the ground, we were creating airplanes and we were flying. And then as things advanced over time, we got even better and better. We know enough nutritional science about plant-based science. It is absolutely solid. It's worth leveraging and benefiting from. And as a society, morally and ethically, our healthcare system, and everybody else in between, should be messaging this out and getting people to align to it. And we can continue to enhance and refine the science as we go on, but there's enough there for us to really change this entire titanic problem we've got as individuals and as a nation. So now our lifespan can be our health span if we are willing to make proper diet and lifestyle choices. So in conclusion, I said, oh, this is a lot of cool information. I want to help my family because my family's got all kinds of health problems. I'm the only one in my family who eats this way. I'm an outlier on both sides of my family. And I have been plant-based now for 7.5 years, it'll be 8 years in September. And I've repeatedly tried to encourage them to adopt the science. They've seen me transform, but they just don't want to go there. And I thought, well, okay, so maybe my problem is, okay, they don't want to go there. So maybe my problem is, you're not a doctor, why should we listen to you, is some of the comments I've heard. So I said, okay, why don't I go and take the Cornell Certificate in Plant-Based Nutrition. Cornell's an Ivy League school, they've got a good reputation, surely if I get that cert, they'll at least start to listen to me, and it may be just enough to nudge them in the right direction, okay, and up my credibility, okay, and they still weren't interested. So the lesson I learned from this, and I take this to you, is please don't take it personally. I did, for many years, I said to myself, I'm the one failing, and I'm not the one failing. Okay, I've done the best I can to share that information, pay it forward, and then you just have to let go and let them make that choice that's right for them. And it may not align with what you want, and they'll continue to suffer, but ultimately, that's their choice to make, and you just have to respect it. So we are in control. Simply by what we put on our plate, we have a whole lot of power and control. Food really matters. Now, we shouldn't be discouraged by what's happening in America and elsewhere in Western countries that eat the Western way. I think we've come a long way in the last 5 to 10 years. I think we're starting to see the tide shift here. If you're familiar with the paradigm shift and adoption curve, I think we're going to reach a tipping point within the next 3 to 5 years. We're seeing a lot more plant-based products come out in food manufacturers and so on, and the mainstream conversation around plant-based science is really starting to go up. So I'm encouraged by what we're seeing, and I would hope that in my lifetime, those norms and attitudes and drivers for food completely shift to traits that you see here, and that we embrace and respect the science for what it is, and really take it. Because I think America could be an amazing nation if we leverage this. Think of all the problems that will go away, and we can really come back and be a force to be reckoned with as a nation if we embrace it. So I'm going to keep encouraging people to take the journey. It could be in little steps. I did a complete 180 overnight because for me, I don't have an off switch. So I can't just eat one chip and hand the bag back. I'll eat the whole bag. So for me, I had to do a complete 180, but for others, maybe they take it one meal at a time, one ingredient at a time, but I'm gonna be there. Anyone who's interested, I wanna help them. So that's why I'm out on social media and all that stuff, trying to help. So my health today is completely different than it was, not only through the plant-based lifestyle, but other things I've learned over the years. So now I don't have any of these problems anymore. My cancer's gone. I don't have a weight issue anymore. I weigh myself on the first of the month. I weigh and I measure myself. I'm within 3 to 5 pounds the whole time. So I don't even worry about that anymore. So my key takeaways, final slide. Key takeaways are, first one, seek out the nutritional scientists. They're the experts, okay? Not someone sitting on the couch at home telling you, right, because clearly that's uncomfortable space, right? Okay, and then respect the science that we already have and leverage it. We've got enough to know that this is the direction we should be heading in. Next one, know that the scientific research continues. So that's that flight metaphor I talked about. They're going to continue researching and finding all kinds of new stuff. And there may be some things that come down the pipe 5, 10 years from now that kind of contradict the stuff we know now, but still we've got enough to leverage to make powerful changes in our food choices. And I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing and listening and waiting for this new science to come, because I think it's just going to take us in an even better direction. Share the science. Let people know. I feel morally and ethically responsible for passing the science forward. If I see someone struggling or I see an opportunity to help someone, I can reach out privately and just share a little bit about my journey, and that's enough to like, oh, really? Yeah, I used to be obese, and I think, would you like some help? I can give you some. And I do things like that. Or I've had cervical cancer and diet-related, so really? And it, just enough to, and if you're interested, I'd be happy to share it, free of charge, doesn't cost you anything, but pay it forward, pass it on, because you never know, you could be making a difference and making a life change for someone. Don't take ownership for the choices people then make. It's really critical you let go, and don't take it personally if they dismiss what you say. Just stand behind the science, be the living testimony, and move on. There'll be others that will, and person by person by person, we will shift this ship around. It's a journey. Progress, not perfection. Get back up and keep going. I've fallen down, I've made mistakes. I've had some stressful times in my life where I've gone back and fallen off the wagon, for lack of a better word, and I get back up and I keep going. Never stop. As Churchill said, don't ever, ever, ever give up. Seek community. All of you guys in this room, you have no idea how much I lean on you emotionally, spiritually, everything else when I come every month, because I'm going home to an environment where I'm the only one, I'm the outlier. This is a powerful force to be reckoned with in this room, and you mean an amazing amount to me, so thank you for the support you're giving me. Community is really important. Get out there and pass it forward. I have an Instagram account called Brit the Foodie, V as in vegetable foodie. So I dedicate that account to sharing the science and passing it forward. If you know of anyone who's curious and wants to know more, please let them know about my account. If they scroll all the way down to the very first post, it's a picture of the China study book. And if you read back up backwards, the numbered posts tell my story, and then I've injected some other slides and photographs of my meals and kind of thing as additional things. I'm out on social media. I go on Facebook to many of these community groups, and I cheer people on and help them out. Maybe PM them once in a while if I see someone making a comment, I'm having a bad day, and I try to support them as best I can with the time I have available. I do presentations like this and go to other events, And then cooking demos and sharing meal. I just had someone over at my house a couple of weekends ago and did a whole Instapot afternoon and sent them home with probably a week's worth of food, plant-based meals and dishes to try. And then be a living example. Each and every one of us, to whatever degree of success we've had from plant-based lifestyle, we are a living testimony that the science works. So stand tall, stand proud in what that means. And then finally, just eat plants. So thank you all. I appreciate the opportunity. Any questions? Yes.
Will this be posted somewhere that we can get access to?
Yes, I've been recorded by Patty here,
Yeah.
so it's going to be.
Put it on the ATX Alive YouTube channel.
So it'll be on the ATX Alive YouTube channel.
Yes, we do. Every lecture since maybe 6 months ago, I've been recording.
It's a live stream, isn't it?
And it's live streamed as well on the church's website. Yep, South Austin Seventh Day Adventist.
Well,
Or
on the Facebook page.
on the Facebook page. Yeah. Yep.
Yes.
B12 vitamins.
Yes.
Can you say something about that? B12 and B12.
Okay, so B12 is naturally found in the soil, and because Western food production methods require vegetables to be hyper-washed before they go into the grocery store, any B12 that was available in the grains of soil that would have been on a plant we would have eaten, for the most part, gone away. So that's why plant-based eaters need to get their B12 from a pig instead of a natural source.
Yeah.
But I make a point though that when I'm home growing vegetables in a pot or something at home, I don't hyper-wash my collards when I bring it in from the pot in the backyard kind of thing. So I get a little bit B12 out of the soil there. It may not be much, but it's a little something.
Hey, Carol, I have a
Can you-
question.
Sorry, can you describe what hyperwashing is when you do it yourself?
So when a food manufacturer harvests a field of, let's say, romaine lettuce, for example, they'll slice the head of lettuce off the root of the plant. They'll bring it back to a washing facility, and it's just basically looks like a dishwashing machine for vegetables. And they run it on conveyors, and they hyper-wash all the soil off. And then that's why it's pre-washed in those bags when you buy salad greens, for example. They've been pre-washed. So hyper-washing is multiple cycles of washing to get all of those soil granules and any other things that may inadvertently be on that plant before it's then bagged and sold to us. Yes?
One question. B12 used to be in the water with the bacteria, naturally in the water, but now we chlorinate it and we kill all the bacteria off and we don't get any B12 at all anymore.
Another reason we do need to be dependent on that one.
And even omnivores also don't get enough B12, so it's not really just for vegans.
Right, because when you look at what cattle in our food production system are fed if they're conventionally raised, okay, they're fed corn, wheat, and soy that's been hyper-processed and ground down to nothing and shipped in big bags and whatever to the feedlots. So there's no soil in that product that's put in the troughs for the animals to eat, so they're not getting much B12 either. Now, if it's grass-fed beef, there's a higher likelihood that animal will have gotten some B12 and therefore be in the meat that is consumed. But we don't need to worry about that since meat's not really our thing anymore, is it? Any other questions? All right.